When a woman likes you badly, but her ego won't let her admit it, the first place that conflict reveals itself is in the gap between her emotional investment and her language. Her words stay neutral, guarded, or even dismissive. But her actions tell a very different story. And this is where most men lose clarity, because they listen to what's said instead of watching what's being done. She may insist she's just being friendly, say she's not looking for anything, or avoid defining the connection altogether. Yet look at how she behaves. She remembers details about your life. She reacts emotionally to your moods. She notices when your energy shifts. She checks in when you go quiet. These behaviors require attention, and attention is not free. People don't invest emotional energy where there is no desire. Psychologically, this contradiction exists because ego and emotion are not aligned. Her ego wants to appear composed, independent, and unaffected. Admitting attraction would mean admitting vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like loss of control. So the ego tightens its grip on language. Words become cautious, strategic, restrained. But behavior comes from a deeper place. It comes from the subconscious, and the subconscious doesn't care about image, it cares about connection. This is why her actions often escalate quietly while her words remain unchanged. She may increase contact without acknowledging why. She may become more supportive, more attentive, more emotionally available, yet still avoid labeling the relationship. To her ego, labeling feels like surrender. To her emotions, staying close feels necessary. So she lives in the tension between the two. Most men try to resolve this tension by forcing clarity. They ask questions, they seek definitions, they want verbal reassurance. But clarity doesn't come from pressure, it comes from observation. When you chase verbal confirmation, you trigger her defense. When you remain grounded and attentive to behavior, you allow the truth to surface naturally. There's also a philosophical lesson here about how desire operates. Wanting someone is not a single moment of realization. It's a gradual accumulation of attention, emotion, and meaning. Ego tries to deny that accumulation because it threatens identity, but the body knows, the emotions know, and over time, behavior becomes impossible to hide. Your power in the situation is not in convincing her to admit anything. It's in staying centered. When you don't overreact to her neutrality and don't chase validation, you create emotional contrast. That contrast highlights her investment. She becomes more aware of how much she's already giving, and that awareness leads to internal reckoning. So don't argue with her words. Don't negotiate attraction. Watch consistency, watch effort, watch emotional presence. Because people can lie with language, but they can't fake sustained investment. And when you learn to trust behavior over declarations, you stop feeling confused and start seeing clearly who is already choosing you, even if their ego hasn't caught up yet. When a woman likes you badly, but our ego won't let her admit it. One of the most reliable indicators is how she reacts when your attention shifts or your presence fades. Not what she says, but what she feels. Emotional reactions are rarely strategic, they're reflexive, and reflexes reveal attachment long before honesty does. You'll notice it when you become less available. Maybe you stop initiating. Maybe your energy softens or redirects elsewhere. Suddenly her tone changes. She might become distant, short, or oddly irritated, or she swings the other way, becoming more engaging, more curious, more present than before. These reactions aren't random, they're responses to a perceived loss of emotional access. Psychologically, this happens because attention creates regulation. When someone we care about is consistently present, our nervous system settles into expectation. When that presence changes, the nervous system reacts before the mind can rationalize it. If she truly didn't care, your absence would barely register. But when she's emotionally invested, even subtle shifts feel destabilizing. Her ego steps in quickly at this point. It tries to reinterpret the reaction. It tells her she's annoyed, not affected. And she's just tired, busy, or distracted. Ego doesn't want to admit dependency because dependency feels like weakness, but emotion doesn't ask permission. It shows up anyway, in mood shifts, defensiveness, or sudden attempts to reestablish connection. This is why you might see contradiction. She says she doesn't mind the distance, but her behavior suggests otherwise. She might question you in subtly, seek reassurance through conversation, or create reasons to interact. Or she may pull back sharply, hoping to regain control by restoring emotional symmetry. Either way, something inside her is responding to the change. Many men misread this and react impulsively. They either chase to relieve the tension or withdraw completely out of frustration. Both responses remove clarity. Chasing forces her ego's power. Total withdrawal ends the dynamic before the truth can surface. The grounded response is steadiness. When you don't over-explain your absence and don't dramatize her reaction, you allow her emotions to speak without interference. You remain present, but not compensating. Calm, not cold. That emotional neutrality creates contrast, and contrast creates awareness. Philosophica. Lie. This reflects a deeper truth about desire. We feel attachment most clearly in moments of disruption. Comfort hides emotion. Absence reveals it. When your presence becomes optional, her emotional response shows how necessary it felt. Over time, repeated shifts in your availability bring clarity, not through confrontation, but through pattern. She begins to notice that her emotional state is add to your presence. And that realization forces a question her ego has been avoiding. Why does this matter so much to me? So don't focus on provoking reactions. Focus on living fully and independently. Let your life have rhythm beyond her attention. Because when someone reacts emotionally to your absence, it's not because they were losing control, it's because they were already invested. And the moment her emotions respond before her words, the truth is no longer whether she cares, but how long she can keep pretending she doesn't. When a woman likes you badly, but her ego won't let her admit it, one of the most persistent patterns you'll notice is that she stays close without ever claiming you. She remains present in your life, texting, reacting, checking in, keeping the connection alive, while simultaneously insisting that it's nothing serious or just friendly. This isn't confusion, it's control meeting desire. She wants proximity because proximity feeds the emotional bond, but she avoids claiming you because claiming would mean accountability. It would mean acknowledging that you matter. Ego resists that admission because once something is named, it can be lost. So she chooses a middle ground, presence without ownership. Psychologically, this behavior serves two purposes. First, it keeps her emotionally regulated. Your presence becomes familiar, grounding, even comforting. Second, it preserves her self-image. She can enjoy the benefits of connection while maintaining the narrative that she's not attached. This internal compromise feels safer than either extreme, full vulnerability or complete detachment. You'll notice how consistent this presence is. Even when she pulls back emotionally, she doesn't disappear. Even when she says she's busy or focused on herself, she still finds ways to stay connected. If she truly didn't care, absence would come naturally. But absence feels like loss, and loss exposes desire. Many men mistake this for indecision and try to force clarity. They ask where things are going. They push for labels. They want confirmation. But pressure turns ego into defense. When pushed, she doubles down on distance. Not because she doesn't want you, but because she refuses to be cornered into vulnerability. The more effective response is observation without attachment. When you don't demand definition and don't chase presence, you remove the emotional scaffolding she's leaning on. You continue living, moving, growing, engaged but not anchored. That shift is subtle but powerful, because now her presence no longer feels optional to her. It feels insufficient. Philosophically, this reflects a deeper truth about human desire. We often want connection without responsibility, intimacy without exposure. Ego craves the comfort of attachment, while avoiding the cost of commitment. But over time, that imbalance becomes unstable. You can't indefinitely stay close to something meaningful without being changed by it. As you remain centered, her strategy starts to fail. Staying present without claiming begins to feel dishonest, to herself more than to you. She feels the tension between what she's doing and what she's denying, and that tension demands resolution. At that point, she faces a choice: step forward and risk vulnerability, or step away and lose proximity. Both outcomes bring clarity, but only one aligns with her desire. So don't be confused by her presence without ownership. Presence is already a choice, and people don't keep choosing proximity to what they feel nothing for. The man who understands this doesn't beg to be claimed. He keeps moving forward, knowing that those who truly want him will eventually have to step into the truth of their desire or fall behind. When a woman likes you badly, but her ego won't let her admit it, she rarely expresses desire directly. Instead, she tests your confidence, not because she wants to undermine you, but because she's trying to answer a question she doesn't yet have the company. Your urge to ask out loud, "Can I want him without losing myself?" These tests often come disguised as indifference. She might delay replies, downplay your importance, or withhold validation that once came easily. Sometimes it shows up as playful disrespect, subtle challenges, or moments where she acts as if your presence is optional. To a man who doesn't understand the psychology, this feels like rejection. But rejection is clean. Testing is not. Testing only happens when there's something at stake. Psychologically, this is about emotional risk assessment. Her ego is standing guard, making sure that if she allows herself to desire you fully, she won't end up emotionally exposed or carrying the weight of the connection alone. So she probes your foundation. She wants to see whether you're comfy. Dense is internal or borrowed from her approval. If you react by seeking reassurance, explaining yourself, or trying to prove your worth, the test fails. Not because you're unworthy, but because you signal dependence, and dependence confirms her fear. It tells her that wanting you might come with emotional responsibility she's not ready to carry. But if you remain centered, calm, self-directed, unbothered, you communicate something far more powerful than words ever could. You show her that your sense of value isn't negotiable, that you don't rise and fall based on how she treats you, that you can be warm without being needy, present without being performative. This steadiness does something important. It removes ego's leverage. When her attempts to destabilize you don't work, she loses the illusion of control she's been clinging to. And without control, ego has no reason to hide desire anymore. There's a philosophical truth here that most people miss. Real confidence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't argue for recognition. It simply remains intact under pressure. And pressure is exactly what these tests are designed to apply. Over time, if you pass these tests, not by enduring disrespect, but by responding with self-respect, the dynamic shifts. The testing stops or it escalates into clarity. She either leans in or fades out, but the ambiguity ends. And this is the outcome you should want, not validation, not attention, clarity. Because when someone tests your worth, they're revealing how much your stability matters to them. And the man who doesn't flinch under those tests doesn't just earn respect, he forces honesty. So don't fear being tested. See it for what it is, desire trying to feel safe. And remember this, anyone who challenges your confidence is already imagining what it would mean to trust it. When a woman likes you badly, but her ego won't let her admit it, the hardest moment for her to maintain the act is when she senses she might actually lose you. As long as she believes you're emotionally available, her ego can stay intact. She can remain guarded, neutral, even distant, while quietly enjoying the certainty of your presence. But the moment that certainty weakens, control begins to slip, and ego panics. You'll feel the shift immediately. Her behavior changes. She becomes more attentive, more responsive, more emotionally open. Conversations that once felt restrained suddenly carry warmth. She may check in more often, initiate contact, or subtly seek reassurance about where she stands with you. These changes aren't calculated. They're reflexive. They happen because attachment has been triggered. Psychologically, this is the point where desire overrides pride. Ego can suppress expression when security feels guaranteed, but it cannot suppress fear of loss. The nervous system reacts faster than the mind can rationalize. That's why her actions shift before her words ever do. She may still avoid direct confession, but her presence intensifies. She leans in, not with declarations, but with behavior. Many men misinterpret this moment and ruin it by overreacting. They rush toward her increased attention, trying to secure clarity, validation, or commitment. But urgency in response to her urgency collapses polarity. It turns her moment of emotional honesty into press. Sure, and pressure revives ego's defenses. The more effective response is composure. You don't withdraw, you don't cling, you stay steady. You continue living your life with purpose, direction, and self-respect. That steadiness forces her to sit with her own emotions. She begins to realize that distance has a cost and that control carries risk. Philosophically, this moment reveals a deeper truth about human desire. We don't fully understand what we value until the possibility of loss becomes real. Comfort hides attachment, uncertainty exposes it, and ego, which thrives on control, collapses when it can no longer guarantee outcome. As you remain grounded, she reaches a crossroads. Either she steps forward, accepting vulnerability, or she retreats, accepting loss. Both outcomes bring truth, but only one aligns with the intensity she's been suppressing. This is not the moment to demand answers or force declarations. It's the moment to observe behavior with clarity. Because when someone fears losing you, their actions stop lying, even if their words still try. So don't chase the change, don't interrogate it, respect it and respect yourself. Keep moving forward, because ego can hide. Desire only while loss feels hypothetical. The moment loss feels real, obsession reveals itself. And the man who understands this doesn't stop walking. He simply notices who can't afford to let him go. At a certain point, when attraction has been suppressed for too long, the tension can no longer live quietly inside her. This is where key point 6 reveals itself. Her ego doesn't just weaken, it starts contradicting itself. You'll notice moments where she says one thing but does another, where her words try to maintain distance while her actions move closer. This internal split is not confusion, it's resistance. She knows what she feels, but she's fighting the meaning of those feelings. From a psychological perspective, this is cognitive dissonance at work. Her self-image tells her she should be detached, in control, unaffected. But her emotional reality is pulling her toward you. When those two forces collide, behavior becomes inconsistent. She might downplay your importance while reacting strongly to your absence. She might claim she's not ready, while emotionally investing more than ever. These contradictions are not accidental. They are symptoms of desire pushing against pride. This is also the moment where many men misunderstand what's really happening. They assume mixed signals mean lack of interest. In truth, mixed signals often mean intense interest constrained by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of losing leverage. Her ego is trying to preserve power, but her emotions are quietly undermining that effort. What matters most here is how you carry yourself. If you seek reassurance, you confirm her fear that emotional honesty leads to loss of control. If you become reactive, you give her ego a reason to stay armored. But if you remain calm, self-directed, and emotionally centered, you create a space where she feels safe enough to stop performing. Philosophically, this moment reflects a deeper law of human connection. Attraction grows toward what is solid, not what is needy, toward what is present, but not grasping. When you don't demand clarity, you invite truth. When you don't chase certainty, you become certainty. Eventually, something has to give. Either she steps beyond ego and aligns her words with her actions, or she retreats fully to protect her self-image. Both outcomes are revelations. One reveals courage, the other reveals limitation. And neither requires you to argue, persuade, or prove your worth. This is where your role ends, not because you don't care, but because you respect yourself enough not to negotiate for desire. You let her face herself. You let her decide whether pride or honesty will lead her life. And tease the real power here. Not control over her feelings, but mastery over your own. When you don't need her to choose you, you give her the freedom to do so authentically, or not at all. Because the strongest attraction doesn't come from being wanted. It comes from being willing to walk away unless the desire is real.